The U.S.'s top diplomat is in the Middle East to try and leverage a new ceasefire deal in the war in Gaza. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been speaking with Israeli officials today, and at a briefing just last hour, he said Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accepted what he calls a three-phase bridging proposal to pause the fighting, and he's calling on Hamas to do the same.
It makes clear that this process will proceed in phases. A first initial ceasefire over the course of 6 weeks in which hostages are released, prisoners are exchanged, and negotiations commence on the conditions necessary for an enduring ceasefire. That's what the deal says. That's what's reflected in what was put before the world, and the world endorsed, the Security Council endorsed, and the bridging proposal was to try to close some gaps or to clarify different parts of this agreement that needed clarification.
This was the scene outside the venue in Tel Aviv for Blinken's briefing with the international media. Families of the remaining hostages held by Hamas in Gaza called on the Biden administration to use its leverage over Israel to secure a truce that would see their loved ones come home after more than 300 days. Ceasefire negotiations are set to resume in Cairo this week. Blinken will head to Egypt tomorrow and then Qatar. Both countries are acting as mediators in the talks. Journalist Iris Mackler was listening in to Blinken's briefing earlier, and she joins us live now from Jerusalem. Iris, talk to us about the main points that Blinken made during that briefing and what Israel's backing of this so-called bridging proposal for a deal might mean for a ceasefire.
Here's the thing. I think the most vital thing is that came out of that briefing is that Washington has nailed Benjamin Netanyahu's hand to the piece of wood that says, yes, I agree to this bridging proposal. And that wasn't obvious because for the last 24 hours, we've heard briefing against the proposal, both from Hamas and from Netanyahu's government. Just last night, we heard Benjamin Netanyahu saying that there's give and take, but there's not give and give, and Israel won't give everything. So this is an about face. It is a result of this pressure from Washington. And what we've heard about that pressure is, 3 hours of meetings with Benjamin Netanyahu, a meeting with Israel's prime minister, a meeting with Israel's defense minister, and then we heard that announcement from Antony Blinken. At the same time, he wasn't, for this last press conference, he was on his own. Benjamin Netanyahu putting out a statement saying that Israel demands the largest possible number of live hostages. I would think that would be an obvious demand for an Israeli leader in this circumstance. And now what he has strengthened Washington's hand when we see Antony Blinken on his way to Egypt tomorrow, to Qatar after that, to see the two other mediators. Other important things that he said, how it's always been crucial to Washington, the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. And it was important to Antony Blinken to say that Israel and Washington are going to see about getting polio vaccines into Gaza. But I think that's a side issue, not of course for the people with polio, but that is a side issue. And the most important thing is this yes to the so-called bridging proposal.
Iris, talk to us about the difficulties that could potentially emerge in the upcoming talks in Cairo.
Well, the first difficulty is that, as you know, there isn't a direct discussion between Antony Blinken, between the US Secretary of State and any Hamas representatives there, if there is anybody from Hamas there at all. The real decision maker is in Gaza, in fact, in a tunnel beneath Gaza, the leader Yahya Sinwar. So what the job that Antony Blinken does is he brings US pressure to bear on the two mediators. And Egypt is an interesting case because Egypt is a mediator and indeed a party. It shares a border with Gaza. And one of the big issues in this new bridging proposal is, will Israel remain in the Philadelphia corridor, so-called? That's the very short border between Gaza and Egypt. Who will be at Rafah, at the border crossing? The Palestinian Authority has put up its hand suddenly. The Palestinian president says he wants to go to Gaza to visit. We haven't seen that for 10 months. Will he be allowed to go? He's made an application to Israel, so don't know what Hamas's reaction to that would be. So all of those issues are on the table now, especially the Philadelphia corridor, and that's where I think Antony Blinken will be putting the pressure, because Washington wants to see a deal, and it wants to see a deal this week if possible, certainly before the Democratic Convention and certainly before the US elections.
Journalist Iris Mackler reporting from Jerusalem. Thanks for this, Iris.